Language is an ancient thing, a powerful thing. Using our words, we can shape the world around us. Some of us weave poems and songs to inspire hope, feelings of love, or careful introspection. Others use their words in grand speeches that send armies to their deaths, or unite the indifferent within our ranks. But the Runekeeper holds a power through language which no one else can. You see, words will shape the world around us so long as the world is willing to listen. But when the Runekeeper speaks, the world must listen. The Runekeeper is a wonderfully detailed class created by the one and only Indestructible. He created an entirely new magic system for using runes inspired from current and previous mechanics regarding runes throughout D&D, such as the Rune Priest from 4th edition and the Rune Knight from 5th edition. Even if you don't care for the Runekeeper class itself for whatever reason, this document contains a new subclass for the Fighter, Druid, and Wizard that allow them to access rune magic, as well as 2 new feats, and, of course, you also gain well over 100 runes and an entirely new magic system for the DM and players to make use of. While it's a little strange to learn at first, it's pretty simple overall, and it fits right into what you would see in the official books if rune magic were to be officially made by Wizards of the Coast. First off, let's mention the hit dice and primary attributes. You have a d8 hit die, so middle of the road as far as health goes, meaning your roll in combat will typically be around the midlines. And for your most important attributes, you'll want intelligence to be your highest, followed secondarily by either constitution or dexterity. While the Runekeeper seems more like a magic-oriented class at first, much like a wizard or a sorcerer, it's designed more like a half-caster, such as a paladin or cleric, meaning that in the midst of combat, you'll be balancing the use of your rune magic with combative prowess using weapons and armor. So now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this class. How does this new rune magic system work? The Runekeeper has a runic lexicon, which is just a set of runes that they remember and know how to inscribe. It is not a physical book or anything like that, like the wizard spellbook. I could have sworn that a lexicon was a physical tome of some sort before making this video. But no, it's just a Greek word for one's vocabulary. So the Runekeeper does not need to carry any special tome with them to be able to inscribe their runes. It's all stored in their head. And if they find some new runes along the way that the Dungeon Master has placed marked onto dungeon walls or magical traps for them to find, they can spend 8 hours studying the rune, after which it is added to their runic lexicon. To learn a new rune, however, whether that be through studying ones you find or by gaining them through leveling up, the Runekeeper must be able to read, speak, and write the language that the rune is in. There are 11 different languages that runes exist in, but thankfully the Runekeeper gives you an ability called Polyglot that lets you swap out a language you know after a long rest to give you more flexibility with what runes you can inscribe and invoke each day. But it's still important to keep in mind which runes you choose for your Runekeeper to learn as they level up, as you'll only be able to make use of runes in the languages that you can read, speak, and write in. So unless your character can speak 2 or 3 other languages besides Common, they'll only have 1 set of runes that they can make use of in a day. And if you know runes of many different languages, you'll be limiting your pool of runes of which you can inscribe and invoke each day. Well, now you've heard me say inscribe and invoke, so what do those words mean in this context? Inscribing runes is the meditative act of carving or marking a rune into an object, which gives it its power. You can inscribe your runes onto any object after completing a long rest, and you can inscribe a number of runes after a long rest equal to your inscribed runes value listed on your Runekeeper table. 2 things to note here. 1. While most runes can be inscribed onto any object, there are a few that can only be inscribed onto specific objects. If this is the case, it will be listed under that rune's prerequisites. 2. Objects can only have 1 rune inscribed on them at a time. So while you can have a number of runes up to your inscribed rune value inscribed at once, they must be on separate items. If you would ever inscribe a new rune onto another item while you're already at your limit, you must choose a rune you have previously inscribed to dismiss, stripping it of its abilities. You can also change what runes you have inscribed on an item that already has one on it after a long rest, so don't worry about constantly needing a new item anytime you want to use a different rune. Just use some magic whiteout on the old rune and inscribe the new one over it. Now that you have an item inscribed with your rune of choice, what does it do? Each rune has two abilities, a passive ability and an activated ability that triggers when you invoke it. To invoke a rune, you must be able to speak the rune's name or touch the rune. Only you can invoke your runes. Even if someone is attuned to one of your runes, they only gain its passive ability. They cannot invoke it themselves. Invoking a rune takes an action to activate. Now, whether it takes a regular action, a bonus action, or a reaction is listed in the rune's description next to invoking time. Once a rune is invoked, it becomes inert, meaning that it cannot be invoked again until you reinscribe it after a long rest. Inert runes do still provide their passive ability. To gain the effects of a rune's passive ability, you must either attune to the rune inscribed on the item, or you must wear or be equipped with the item bearing the rune. Each rune will say which one is required to gain its passive effect. Let's look at a couple of examples so you can get a better understanding of how runes work. Here we have the rune Erngor, which is in the Dwarvish language and translates to mountain. Its passive ability reads, the creature wearing or carrying this inscribed object has advantage on ability checks and saving throws using strength that they make against effects that would knock them prone or move them against their will while they are standing on solid ground. So to inscribe this rune, you must be able to speak, read, and write Dwarvish. As you can see, there are no prerequisites, so this can be inscribed onto any object, and anyone holding or wearing an object inscribed with Erngor becomes much harder to be pushed or knocked down while on solid ground. Just below the passive ability, we see Invoking Time, 1 action. Duration, 1 minute. You gain Tremor Sense out to a distance of 30 feet for the duration. So as an action, if you are able to speak the Dwarvish language, you can say the name of the rune, or be touching it. When you do, for the next minute, you gain Tremor Sense out to 30 feet. Keep in mind that it says that you gain Tremor Sense, not the person bearing the rune. After invoking this rune, as with all runes, you must reinscribe it after a long rest to be able to invoke it again. Now let's look at a much more complicated rune. This rune is the name of a legendary dragon, Bahamut. It is from the Draconic language, it translates to sacred, and is an elder rune. Now, being an elder rune doesn't do anything special on its own. There are several other elder runes, and they're designed to be more powerful than regular runes. But mainly, elder is just a tag that's referenced by other runes for balance purposes, which we'll see in this rune's prerequisites. Bahamut's prerequisites are: Prerequisite: 9 other inscribed celestial or draconic runes, none of which can be an elder rune. So to inscribe this rune, you of course must be able to speak, read, and write the draconic language, but you must also have 9 other runes already inscribed that are either of the draconic language and or the celestial language, and none of those 9 runes can be an elder rune. All elder runes have this prerequisite, so you will only be able to have 1 elder rune inscribed per long rest. You also won't be able to inscribe this rune, or any elder rune for that matter, until you're at 17th level, since you'll have to be able to inscribe 10 runes at once to inscribe an elder rune. This is how the Runekeeper keeps you from making use of high-level runes at lower levels. You'll see several other runes that have a prerequisite requiring you to have a set number of other runes of a specific language already inscribed before you can inscribe it. Almost like the Runekeeper's version of a spellcaster's spell levels limiting what spells they can cast at what player level. Moving on to the item, it says that it can be inscribed onto any object, but the wielder of the inscribed object must attune to this rune to be able to gain this rune's passive ability. Note that I said you must attune to the rune itself, not the item. Attuning to a rune is the same as attuning to a magic item. Same process, and it counts as one of the 3 magic items you can be attuned to at once. So if you inscribe a rune onto a magical item that requires attunement itself, such as Flame Tongue, for a player to make use of the Flame Tongue and the rune that's inscribed on it, they would have to attune to both the Flame Tongue and the rune, taking up 2 of their attunement slots. But at 7th level, the Runekeeper gains a feat that makes it so that a player only needs to attune to the item that has 1 or more runes inscribed on it to gain their passive benefits. So don't let that initial ruling for attuning to runes and magic items individually turn you off of this class. Moving on to the passive ability of the Bahamut rune, it reads, The creature can use their action to exhale fiery radiance in a 30-foot cone. Each creature in that area must make a dexterity saving throw, taking 8d10 radiant damage on a failed save or half as much damage on a successful one. When the creature uses this action, it can choose up to 3 creatures in the cone. These creatures take no damage from the radiance and instead regain 4d10 hit points each. Once the creature uses this breath attack, it cannot do so again until it finishes a long rest. So it basically gives the attuned creature the ability to make a fire breath attack that can heal allies in its range once per long rest. Moving down to the invoke ability, it says invoking time, special, duration, instantaneous. When you fail a saving throw, you can invoke this rune to succeed instead, no action required. Once you invoke this rune, you must spend 5 runic charges to do so again. So unlike other runes invoking abilities that require an action, this rune's invoke ability triggers whenever you fail a saving throw. When you fail that saving throw, if you can speak, read, and write Draconic, and are able to speak, you can utter the words Bahamut to succeed the saving throw instead. And as you'll notice, at the end of the ability, it states that you can invoke the rune again by spending 5 runic charges. That's because at 5th level, you gain the feat Causal Invocation, which gives you a new resource called Runic Charges, which lets you invoke an inert rune by spending 1 runic charge. But of course, as in this case, some runes require more runic charges to invoke while inert. So now we've covered the rune magic system and looked at some examples of a basic rune and a more complicated rune. Hopefully you understand how it all works, because now we're moving on to how the class plays. As I mentioned earlier, the Runekeeper is a half-caster. It is proficient with light and medium armor, as well as simple weapons, warhammers, and polearms. So you have a good middle-of-the-road kit to work with in combat when it comes to taking hits and dishing them out when needed. But your main role won't be to deal damage, though that will invariably be one of your duties. Your biggest asset are the passive abilities your runes give to your allies, as well as yourself. In this way, you play the role of support, but don't let the word support scare you, because you won't be existing just to give your party heals and buffs on your turn each combat, like many envision when they hear that forsaken word. Rather, the Runekeeper has a very active playstyle in combat, having to balance when it's worth spending an action on making an attack or invoking a rune, as well as keeping in mind your positioning. But you'll of course still want to choose your runes wisely as you level up, to make sure that they play into your party's strengths and either enhance their core features or make up for their weaknesses. There are a lot of runes to choose from, and they're designed to synergize with one another, growing stronger the more runes you have inscribed that match their language or translation. Picking your runes feels a lot like making a deck in a deck building game such as Magic the Gathering, getting to choose which runes synergize best with one another, as well as with the abilities your subclass grants you. But always feel free to pick any runes you like the sound of and think would be fun to use or that fit the theme of your character. If you prefer to build your characters around themes rather than optimization, there's nothing wrong with that, so long as it doesn't hinder the fun of the other players. While in the midst of battle, you don't want to get right into the center of it. You're not a tank. You'll preferably stay in front of the casters and other classes with low HP, but behind the high AC, high HP players. This is partly because your weapons, HP, and armor make you most suited for the midlines, but it also allows for optimal use of your rune stance, as at 3rd level, you learn how to channel latent power within your runes by taking on a protective or destructive stance as a bonus action. While in your rune stance, you provide a passive benefit within a 10-foot radius of yourself, which is more powerful the more runes you have inscribed. Your protective stance reduces incoming damage for you and your allies within range, and your destructive stance, surprise surprise, makes it so that enemies within its range take additional damage. Your subclass will also add an additional effect to your rune stance, giving you 3 additional options to choose from and add on top of your protective or destructive stance when you activate it, but I'll briefly go over those later in the video. Your rune stance lasts as long as you want it to, only ending when you're knocked unconscious, which is normally only going to happen whenever you're put to sleep or reach 0 hit points. And it doesn't need to be refreshed on a short or long rest either, so make sure you always have your stance active during combat because there's no reason not to use it. And remember to switch your stance up as much as you need to. It only takes a bonus action to activate and switch, and it's crucial to make use of your protective stance when you know a big hit is coming or your allies are low on HP. And the same is true for your destructive stance when you really need to take out a large and cumbersome threat. Once you gain the additional rune stance abilities that your subclass provides, this advice is doubly true with all of the versatility and utility the additional abilities provide. Another crucial ability worth mentioning that I mentioned in brief earlier is your 5th level feature, Causal Invocation. This feature, in a way, is the Runekeeper's version of spell slots. Until you reach level 5, you can only invoke each rune once per long rest, as it becomes inert until you reinscribe it. But Causal Invocation gives you a resource called Runic Charges, which you can spend to re-invoke your inert runes. Each rune takes 1 runic charge to re-invoke, and you can even re-invoke the same rune multiple times, provided you have the runic charges for it. Some runes will specifically state in their invocability that they require more than 1 runic charge to invoke while inert, in which case, you must simply spend the amount of runic charges listed to re-invoke it. Much like spell slots, you regain all of your runic charges after a long rest. You only ever have a number of runic charges equal to half of your Runekeeper level, so make sure you invoke your runes at critical points when they'll have the greatest impact to maximize the value you can receive from them. But at the same time, remember to actually use them, because if you take a long rest after a long day of adventuring and you still have uninvoked runes and several runic charges left, then you more than likely gave you and your party some disadvantages earlier in the day that you didn't have to. The Runekeeper acquires their knowledge from divine philosophies and truths of reality. Words are tied to the essence of reality and our understanding therein. The spoken word has naturally held power since it was first created. When a culture speaks these truths into a language, their words can be channeled into a power that shapes the world accordingly. After all, many spells require verbal components for a reason, and many devils may be sent back to their plane by simply uttering their name. Runekeepers harness this fundamental power of language through study, understanding, and oral tradition. They dabble in esoteric knowledge, much like the sages and alchemists of our world once did. It is an honor to bear such a power, though some may use it to fulfill more selfish ideals. Nonetheless, Runekeepers are often as wise as they are fit, and the most devout among them will wear pendants inscribed with runes as protective charms, or mark them beneath their skin with ink to show their bond to the power of runic magic. Thanks to their training in the art of inscribing runes, Runekeepers are proficient with calligraphers' tools, as well as any other artisan's tool they may find useful in their craft. Their sacred studies have also given many of them a deeper understanding of religion, nature, and arcana, and their introspective minds allow them to excel in history, investigation, insight, and perception. They can speak many languages thanks to their supernatural connection to runic magic, allowing them to switch a language they know for another one after a long rest. They can also read the writing of any language and understand it, even if they can't speak it, thanks to the eyes of the Runekeeper. Eventually, a Runekeeper will be able to speak, read, and write all languages through their abilities, allowing them to communicate with anyone and everyone that the party may come across on their journeys. Though not all of their connections to the arcane have led to advancements in language, as their tie connects them to the arcane itself, granting them a hermetic intuition. Ancient teachings resonate throughout the mind of a Runekeeper, allowing them to sense magical energy at will. In-game, this manifests as the ability to cast Detect Magic at will, though you must maintain concentration on it for it to stay active. You may also interact with any magical source that you are aware of without causing a spell or magical effect to trigger from it, giving you an edge when it comes to disarming any magical traps you may stumble across on your adventures. So the Runekeeper has plenty of potential outside of combat. They can work as a peacekeeper and translator for the party, negotiating with foreign adversaries, or talking down bloodthirsty foes through their mastery of language. They can blaze a safe trail for the party to cross through in trap-laden dungeons, and appraise magic items with their mastery over history, arcana, and their hermetic intuition. They will no doubt have much wisdom to share during long journeys or nights by the campfire. Wisdom on life, purpose, and the power of the voice and the written word that lies within each and every one of us. The Runekeeper has 6 subclasses, and each of them focuses on utilizing runes from a specific language, much like how a wizard subclass focuses on a specific school of magic. And accordingly, these subclasses are called dialects. Now, I will say that there aren't any subclasses devoted to the Elven or Primordial runes. While looking at the Elven and Primordial runes on the rune list, it mentions that subclasses centered around these languages are planned to be added in the future. And it would be nice if that happened one day, but I doubt it ever will, as Taron Pounds has moved on to his own TTRPG, Vagabond, and he has expressed in his videos that he wants to distance himself from creating content for D&D 5th edition moving forward. First up is the Dethic dialect, whose specialty lies with Dwarvish runes. Now I will say, I am a little confused on one of their feats called Call of Iron, as well as another feat for the Fiendish subclass, as both feats are worded very similarly. Call of Iron says you gain an additional Deathic rune for which you meet the prerequisites, but there are no runes with a Deathic tag or with Deathic in their description, or even a list of runes in the subclass that are unique to the Deathic dialect, and every other subclass's second feat except for the Fiendish subclass references one of the runic languages. So I assume that it's supposed to say that you gain an additional Dwarvish rune, and the Fiendish subclass is supposed to say that you gain an additional Abyssal rune. Maybe I'm missing something, but I scoured the entire document and couldn't figure out what it meant otherwise. Either way, the Call of Iron feat also embodies your Dwarvish craftsmanship, by allowing you to spend your downtime engraving a special rune into a weapon or piece of armor. This rune doesn't count as an inscribed rune, meaning it won't count against your rune limit, but also won't count towards your abilities that grow more powerful for each rune you have inscribed. It also only provides its passive benefit, as it can't be invoked, but hey, an extra rune is an extra rune. As with all dialects, the Deathic dialect offers 3 additional abilities to choose from when activating your rune stance. Keep in mind that the ability you choose is added on top of your initial protective or destructive stance ability. When entering your stance, your Dwarvish Fortitude and Tenacity gives you the choice of increasing your AC, buffing your allies against being frightened, or letting you attack twice with one attack action. As you level up, your Deathic teachings will allow you to inscribe a single item with up to 3 runes at once, letting you create a beastly and formidable magic item engraved from head to toe in runes that even Gimli would blush at. And at 14th level, your bonds to Dwarvish philosophy tie you to the fury of the red-hot forge that so many monumental dwarven artifacts of old were born within, allowing you to ignite creatures you strike with a melee attack, breaking through their fire resistances and immunities, and causing them to take additional fire damage from each melee attack that strikes them afterwards. They will also be unable to frighten any creature while under the effects of the fury of the forge, brought to shame before the might of the Deathic dialect. Next is the Fiendish dialect, which holds mastery over infernal and abyssal runes. As I mentioned earlier, you learn an additional, as the feat puts it, Fiendish rune of your choice, though once again, unless I'm missing something, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to say that you learn an additional abyssal or infernal rune of your choice. This feature also allows you to steal the vitality of those that have wronged you, letting you regain health when attacking a creature who damaged you on their last turn. Your rune stance becomes enhanced with Fiendish abilities, giving you the choice of making hostile creatures within your stance's range more susceptible to being charmed, forcing enemies in range to make a charisma save whenever they heal, taking necrotic damage instead on a fail, or force creatures who cast spells of a level lower than half the number of runes you have inscribed to make a constitution saving throw, countering their spell on a fail. At higher levels, invoking your abyssal or infernal runes hinders your foe's ability to make charisma saving throws, making them more vulnerable to your second Fiendish rune stance ability. And at the zenith of your Fiendish dialect, your understanding of the profane and the power words hold over it grants you an incredible power to summon a wicked creature to do your bidding in your darkest hour. Upon reaching 0 hit points, you issue a command before falling unconscious. Then, a devil, demon, or Yugoloth is summoned to protect your body and attack your enemies as dictated by your command. Once it completes this order, you are revived at 1 HP and marred with a rune that cannot be removed by any means short of a wish spell, to signify your debt to the fiend which you summoned. You can't use this ability again until you settle your debt with them. The DM will decide what must be owed to settle this debt, though it shouldn't require anything more complicated than requiring an offering or a sacrifice be made. Just be sure to talk with your DM ahead of time about this feature to make sure you both feel any debts you might accrue with this feat are reasonably achievable and fitting for your character, especially if you have a particular idea in mind. But in the end, the DM always gets the final say. Moving on, we have the Gukliek dialect, I think I pronounced that right, which specializes in the savage and chaotic runes of the Goblin language. Hell yeah. Naturally, Chaos runes now count as Goblin runes for you, and you gain an additional Goblin rune of your choice. When you use an action to invoke a rune or disengage, allies nearby can immediately move up to half their speed without triggering opportunity attacks, scattering like the gremlins you always wanted them to be. Your goblin-y ways have even influenced the powers of your rune stance, as it works very differently than the other rune stance upgrades. When you activate your rune stance, you must make a wisdom save, which you can choose to fail, and will probably want to, as when you fail, you get to roll a d6 and gain a random ability from the Goblin Rune Stance table for the duration of your rune stance. At 10th level, whenever you would roll on a table for your Goblin Runes or your Goblin Rune Stance, you can roll 2 dice and choose which of the results to keep. If both dice match, then you can choose any option from the table you rolled on. Remember that Chaos Runes count as Goblin Runes with this dialect, so this ability affects them as well. And at 14th level, your Affinity for Mischief grants you the power to make your runes explode as you invoke them, dealing massive damage in a 20-foot radius around the rune, and pushing back any creatures unfortunate enough to be caught within the eruption. Next we have the Iokaric dialect, which is focused around Draconic runes. Your very being is infused with a fraction of a dragon's might, drastically increasing your jump height and distance, which can be used to land on top of your foes to knock them prone and damage them. Your practice with Draconic runes infuses your rune stance with the options of suspending yourself in midair after a jump, hindering your enemy's saving throws against being frightened, or giving resistance of a Draconic damage type to you and your allies within range. At 10th level, you can harness the resilience of a dragon, gaining advantage on your next saving throw after invoking a rune. And at 14th level, whenever you make use of your enhanced jump and land on an unoccupied space, your Draconic Fury erupts from the ground around you in a 20-foot radius, dealing elemental damage to those within it, and the further you fall before landing, the more destructive the ensuing eruption will be. Now we move on to a dialect that the Runekeeper would be incomplete without, the Jotun dialect, who holds mastery over the runes of the giants. This connection allows you to grow in size at will, giving you increased reach, damage, and allows you to wield a two-handed weapon with only a single hand. Your Jotun rune stance imbues you with the zeal and grandeur of the giants, giving you the choice of an extra attack, increasing your movement speed, or allows you to spend hit dice to heal yourself at the start of your subsequent turns. At 10th level, whenever you invoke a rune, you can channel the blind rage of the giants to make an attack as a bonus action. And at 14th level, you permanently become large, always dealing extra damage on attacks. You can now grow beyond this size at will as well, further increasing your reach when you do so, and you may call upon this titanic power twice per short or long rest. Lastly, we have the most divine of the dialects, the Supernal dialect, centered around the celestial language. Those who wear or wield an item inscribed with one of your celestial runes gains a bonus to being healed, which increases the more runes you have inscribed. Your celestial rune stance grants you sacred magics, allowing you to give you and your allies resistance to being charmed, emit bright light that suppresses magical darkness, or allow you and your allies to retain excess healing as temporary hit points. At 10th level, your bond with the ancient language of the Celestials unlocks a universal understanding through your words, allowing any creature to understand you when you speak the Celestial language. You also have a small chance to retain any hit dice you would spend to invoke a rune, and at 14th level, you gain Censure of the Peacemaker, letting you show your wicked foes just how blind their sins have made them, permanently forcing them to make a saving throw each time they make an attack or cast a damaging spell. If they fail to save, they become blinded until the start of their next turn. The only way this effect ends is if the creature succeeds the saving throw 3 times total while under its influence. Also, to clarify, this blindness will immediately affect the attack or spell that the enemy is making, and there are 3 possibilities for this. If the enemy is making a weapon or spell attack, the blindness will immediately cause the attack roll to be made with disadvantage. If the enemy is casting a spell that requires them to see their target, the blindness will cause that spell to stop immediately, taking no effect. And lastly, if the spell targets a point within range, like Fireball does, there is no downside to being blinded, at least rules is written. Realistically and flavorfully, the spell would probably be off-center from where the caster intended it to be cast. Maybe a perception check would be required for accuracy, or the players could be given advantage on their saving throw against the spell. But it's entirely up to your DM as to whether this blindness will actually penalize spells that don't require line of sight. If the idea of a runic magic system intrigues you, or you wish to play as a Runekeeper yourself, you can purchase this document on Taron Pounds' website, as well as the DM's Guild, both linked in the description. Taron Pounds has also made his own video on this class, so feel free to check that out as well, also linked in the description. I hope I was able to inspire you to try something new in your future D&D campaigns, and most of all, I hope you're doing well. See you in the next one.